The sound of ice cracking beneath her feet sent shivers up Zara Montgomery's spine that had nothing to do with the biting January wind of 1878. Her arms burned with the weight of her brother's limp body as she inched forward across the frozen North Platte River, each step a prayer that the ice would hold. "Just a little further, Adam," she whispered to her unconscious brother, his fevered face buried against her shoulder. At 18, he was too heavy for her 22-year-old frame, but desperation gave her strength as she struggled toward the opposite bank where smoke curled from a distant chimney. 3 days of watching Adam waste away with fever in their isolated cabin after their parents' burial had driven her to this desperate crossing. The doctor was 2 days' ride to the east, but the homestead on the north bank represented her only hope of saving her brother's life. The ice groaned again, a deep resonant sound that seemed to come from the very heart of the river. Zara froze, holding her breath as a spider web of cracks spread beneath her worn boots. When the sound subsided, she forced herself forward again, eyes fixed on the bank that seemed impossibly far away. "Help!" Her voice sounded thin against the vast Wyoming landscape. "Please, somebody help us!" As if in answer to her plea, a figure appeared on the north bank, tall and broad-shouldered against the endless sky. The man's shout carried across the ice. "Don't move, stay where you are." But Zara couldn't stop. Adam's breath came in shallow gasps against her neck, each one possibly his last. The stranger disappeared from view, then reappeared, moving onto the ice with a long rope tied around his waist, the other end secured to a sturdy pine at the river's edge. "The ice won't hold both of you," he called, his voice deep and commanding. "Wait there." 20 feet separated them when the ice gave way beneath Zara's left foot. She screamed as frigid water engulfed her leg up to the knee. With desperate strength, she lurched forward, somehow keeping her balance and Adam's weight above the broken surface. The stranger was there in an instant, strong arms reaching for her brother. "Let me take him," he urged, his blue eyes intense beneath the brim of his worn hat. "You can't make it carrying him." Zara hesitated only a moment before surrendering her brother's weight. The man hoisted Adam over his shoulder with surprising gentleness, then extended his free hand. "Take my hand and follow exactly in my footsteps." His palm was calloused but warm as it enveloped hers. Step by cautious step, he guided her toward the safety of the shore, the ice protesting beneath their combined weight. When they finally reached solid ground, Zara's legs gave way. She collapsed onto the snow-covered bank, gasping for breath as the man laid Adam down beside her. "My brother," she managed between chattering teeth. "Please, he's burning with fever." The stranger knelt beside Adam, placing a hand on his forehead. "How long has he been like this?" 3 days. "Our parents died of influenza last week. I thought we'd escaped it, but then Adam." Her voice broke. "The doctor's too far. I saw your chimney smoke." The man nodded once, decision made. "I'm Bryce Harlan. My ranch is just over that rise. Can you walk?" Zara tried to stand, but her soaked leg had gone numb. Bryce didn't wait for her to answer. After gathering Adam in his arms, he somehow managed to help her to her feet. "Lean on me," he ordered, and Zara had no choice but to comply, hobbling alongside him as they made their way toward his homestead. The ranch house was modest but solid, built of sturdy logs with a covered porch that faced the distant mountains. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth inside. A weathered barn stood nearby, and a corral held 3 horses that raised their heads at their approach. "Through here," Bryce directed, shouldering open the door and carrying Adam to a bed in what appeared to be the main room of the cabin. A fire blazed in the hearth, and the room was blessedly warm after the frozen river crossing. Zara limped to her brother's side as Bryce laid him on the bed. "Thank you," she whispered, brushing Adam's damp hair from his forehead. "I don't know what I would have done, save your thanks," Bryce interrupted, already moving to stoke the fire. "You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. There's a trunk with some old things by the bed. They'll be too big, but they're dry." He nodded toward a screen in the corner. "You can change there. I'll see to your brother." Too exhausted to argue, Zara found the trunk and pulled out a flannel shirt and trousers that must have belonged to a much smaller man than Bryce. Behind the screen, she peeled off her sodden dress and undergarments, wrapping herself in the borrowed clothes that smelled faintly of soap and wood smoke. When she emerged, Bryce was spooning something into Adam's mouth, supporting his head with a gentle hand. He glanced up at her appearance but made no comment about her makeshift attire. "It's willow bark tea," he explained. "Might help bring down the fever, my mother swore by it." Zara moved to the bedside, taking over the task of supporting Adam's head. "You live here alone?" Bryce nodded, stepping back to give her space. 5 years now, ranch belongs to me and my brother. He's back east getting supplies." He watched her for a moment. "You're the Montgomerys from the South Fork, aren't you?" Surprise flickered across Zara's face. "You know of us, small territory." "Word travels." He moved to hang a kettle over the fire. "Heard about your folks, I'm sorry." The simple words of condolence threatened to undo her carefully maintained composure. Zara blinked back tears and focused on her brother. "We buried them 4 days ago." "I thought we'd be all right, but then Adam." "Influenza's a devil," Bryce said quietly. "My father and sister were taken by it 3 winters back." The shared grief hung between them, a tangible presence in the warm cabin. Zara studied the man who had risked his life to save them. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent in the harsh Wyoming elements. His dark hair curled slightly where it met the collar of his shirt, and beneath the grime of outdoor work, his features were unexpectedly refined. "The nearest doctor's in Laramie," Bryce continued, measuring coffee grounds into a pot. 2 days' ride in this weather if the passes are clear." "Which they won't be after last night's snow," Zara finished for him. The realization that they were truly isolated settled heavily on her shoulders. "I don't know what to do for him except try to bring down the fever." Bryce regarded her thoughtfully. "My mother was a healer of sorts. Taught me a few things before she passed. Between the two of us, we might be able to pull him through." He poured a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "Drink, you look half frozen yourself." The coffee was strong and hot, warming her from the inside out. Zara cradled the cup in her hands, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "I haven't slept in 2 days," she admitted. "There's room enough for you both here," Bryce said, his tone matter of fact. "You can take my bed, I'll bunk by the fire." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," he interrupted firmly. "Your brother needs you strong, and you're no good to him exhausted." Something in his steady gaze broke through Zara's stubborn independence. She nodded gratefully and returned her attention to Adam, whose breathing seemed slightly less labored. "He's all I have left now," she whispered. Bryce's expression softened. "Then we'd best make sure he stays with you." Over the next 3 days, they worked together to bring Adam's fever down. Bryce revealed a surprising knowledge of herbal remedies, brewing teas of willow bark and elderberry, preparing poultices of mustard and flax to draw out the fever. Zara kept cool compresses on her brother's forehead, spooning broth between his cracked lips whenever he stirred. On the evening of the 3rd day, as a winter storm howled outside the snug cabin, Adam's fever finally broke. He opened his eyes, confusion giving way to recognition as he focused on his sister's face. "Zara," his voice was weak but clear. "Where are we?" Tears of relief streamed down Zara's face as she clasped his hand. "Safe. We're safe, Adam." Bryce, who had been tending the fire, moved to stand beside the bed. "Welcome back, young man. You gave your sister quite a scare." Adam's gaze shifted to the unfamiliar man. "Who?" "This is Bryce Harlan," Zara explained. "He saved our lives when I tried to cross the river to find help for you." Recognition dawned in Adam's eyes. "The Harlan place, Pa mentioned it." He attempted to sit up but fell back weakly. "How long have I been out?" 3 days here, Zara told him. 3 days before that at our cabin." Adam's eyes widened. "Nearly a week," he looked between them. "And you've been caring for me all this time?" Bryce shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with the gratitude in the young man's eyes. "Your sister did most of the work, I just provided the roof." "He's being modest," Zara countered. "He knows more about healing fevers than most doctors I've met." A flush crept up Bryce's neck. My mother was the healer. I just remembered what she taught me. He turned away, busying himself with the coffee pot. You should rest more. Your body's been through an ordeal. As if to prove his point, Adam's eyes were already drooping. Thank you, he murmured as sleep reclaimed him. Zara watched her brother for a long moment, making sure his breathing remained steady. When she was satisfied, she joined Bryce by the fire. He's going to be all right, she said softly. Bryce nodded, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. He's young and strong. Give him a few days and he'll be back on his feet. Thanks to you. Zara hesitated, then placed her hand on his arm. I don't know how I can ever repay you for what you've done. His gaze met hers, something unreadable flickering in their blue depths. There's no debt between neighbors out here, Miss Montgomery. We all survive by helping one another. Zara, she corrected him. After all we've been through, I think you've earned the right to use my given name. A smile softened his features, transforming his face in a way that made her heart beat a little faster. Zara, then. They sat in companionable silence, watching the fire and listening to the storm outside. For the first time since her parents' deaths, Zara felt the crushing weight of responsibility lift slightly from her shoulders. Here in this warm cabin with this quiet, capable man, she could breathe again. What will you do now? Bryce asked finally, after your brother recovers. The question brought her crashing back to reality. Try to keep the homestead going, I suppose. Pa had 60 acres cleared and planted last season. The livestock needs tending. She trailed off, the magnitude of the task ahead suddenly overwhelming. That's a lot for two people to manage, Bryce observed, especially with one of you still recovering. We don't have much choice, Zara replied, straightening her shoulders. It's our land, our home. Bryce studied her for a long moment. My brother Ben won't be back for another month at least. When Adam's strong enough to travel, I could ride over with you, help get things in order. The offer stunned her. You would do that, you barely know us. I know enough, he said simply. And as I said, out here we help each other. Zara wanted to refuse, to insist they could manage on their own, but pragmatism won out over pride. Thank you, she said quietly. We would be grateful for the help. Over the next week, as Adam regained his strength, Zara found herself settling into an unexpected rhythm with Bryce. They shared the chores of the small ranch, Zara taking over the cooking and indoor tasks, while Bryce tended to the livestock and chopped endless cords of firewood to keep the cabin warm against the bitter January cold. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Bryce often reading aloud from one of the surprisingly numerous books that lined a small shelf beside his bed. Adam would listen drowsily from his sipped, while Zara mended clothes or worked on a quilt she had started from scraps in Bryce's mending basket. It was during these quiet evenings that Zara began to understand the man who had saved them. Beneath his reserved exterior was a thoughtful, educated mind. He spoke knowledgeably about farming techniques, animal husbandry, and the politics that were shaping the Wyoming territory. He had opinions about the railroad's expansion and the treatment of the native tribes, views that surprised her with their compassion and foresight. How did you come to be so well-read? She asked one evening after he had finished a passage from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Most ranchers I've known barely have time for a newspaper, let alone philosophy. A shadow crossed his face. I wasn't always a rancher. Back east, I was studying to be a doctor. A doctor? Zara set aside her mending. What happened? Bryce's gaze returned to the fire. My father died. Then my sister. The influenza epidemic of '73, my mother couldn't manage alone, so I came home. He shrugged, as if the abandonment of his dreams was of little consequence. Ben and I took over the ranch after she passed the following year. I'm sorry, Zara said softly. That explains your knowledge of medicine. 2 years of medical school doesn't make me a doctor, he replied, but out here any knowledge helps. From his bed, Adam spoke up. You'd have made a fine doctor from what I can tell. You saved my life. Bryce looked uncomfortable with the praise. You're young and strong. You'd likely have pulled through regardless. Not without help, Zara insisted. Don't diminish what you did for us, Bryce. He met her gaze, and something passed between them that made her breath catch. Perhaps there was a reason I never finished my studies, he said quietly. If I'd been back east practicing medicine, I wouldn't have been here when you crossed that river. The thought of what might have happened if Bryce hadn't been there sent a chill through Zara. Then I'm selfishly glad you became a rancher instead, she admitted. His smile warmed her more than the blazing fire. As am I, Zara, as am I. By the time Adam was strong enough to travel, nearly 2 weeks had passed. The bitter cold had given way to a brief January thaw, making the journey back to the Montgomery homestead possible, if not entirely comfortable. The morning of their departure, Zara found herself reluctant to leave the safety and warmth of Bryce's cabin. She had grown accustomed to his quiet presence, his dry humor, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The thought of returning to the isolated cabin where her parents had died filled her with dread. We could stay until spring, Adam suggested as they prepared to leave, sensing his sister's hesitation. The livestock will have either survived or not by now. We need to know either way, Zara replied, forcing practicality into her voice. And we can't impose on Mr. Harlan's hospitality indefinitely. Bryce, the rancher corrected, entering the cabin with an armload of firewood, and it's no imposition. He stacked the wood neatly by the hearth. But your sister's right, Adam. Better to know what you're facing sooner rather than later. He turned to Zara. I've packed provisions for a week. Should give us time to assess the situation and make any necessary repairs. The us in his statement warmed her more than it should have. You don't need to come with us, she protested weakly. You've done more than enough. I said I would help and I meant it, Bryce replied, his tone brooking no argument. Besides, Ben would skin me alive if he knew I let a woman and her recovering brother head out alone in January. Adam grinned. Best not to anger your brother on our account. I'm looking forward to meeting this Ben when he returns. He's nothing like me, Bryce warned, a fond smile softening his features. Louder, more opinionated, thinks he knows everything. Sounds like most older brothers, Zara observed, younger actually by 3 years. Bryce picked up their bags. Ready, the journey to the Montgomery homestead took most of the day. Bryce insisted Adam ride his most gentle mare while he and Zara shared the sturdier gelding. The proximity required by their shared mount left Zara acutely aware of Bryce's solid presence behind her, his arm occasionally brushing hers as he guided the horse along the snowy trail. When they crested the final ridge overlooking the Montgomery property, Zara held her breath, afraid of what they might find. The cabin stood intact, though snow had drifted against the north wall nearly to the eaves. The barn door hung open, swinging slightly in the winter breeze. Home, Adam said softly, but the word held more uncertainty than joy. Bryce urged his horse forward. Let's see what we're dealing with. The next hours were a flurry of activity as they assessed the property. The cabin was cold but undamaged. To Zara's relief, 2 of their 3 cows had survived in the barn, though they were thin and clearly hungry. Their chickens were gone, either dead from the cold or taken by predators. The stable that had housed their 2 horses was empty. Neighbors might have taken them in, Bryce suggested as they surveyed the empty stalls. Word about your parents would have spread, or thieves, Adam said darkly. Possible, Bryce acknowledged, but let's give folks the benefit of the doubt for now. By nightfall, they had the cabin warmed, the surviving livestock fed, and a simple meal prepared from the provisions Bryce had brought. Adam, exhausted from the journey and the emotional toll of returning home, retired early to the small room he had shared with their father. Zara sat with Bryce at the kitchen table, a lamp casting long shadows across the familiar space that now felt utterly changed. It feels strange being here without them, she admitted. Like I'm waiting for them to walk through the door. Bryce reached across the table and covered her hand with his. That feeling never entirely goes away, he said gently, but it does get easier to bear. She turned her hand to clasp his, drawing strength from his steady presence. How do you do it, live alone with all those memories? You find new memories to make, he replied, new reasons to get up each morning. His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand. And you're not alone, Zara. You have Adam. And you, The question slipped out before she could stop it, laden with more meaning than she had intended. His eyes, illuminated by the lamplight, held hers. "And me, if you want." The simple statement hung between them, full of possibility. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she realized how much she had come to depend on this quiet, steadfast man in such a short time. "I'm not sure what that means," she whispered. Bryce's expression grew uncertain, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "Neither am I, exactly. I just know that the thought of riding away and leaving you two to manage alone sits poorly with me." "You have your own ranch to run," Zara reminded him. "Ben will be back soon, and our properties aren't that far apart, not on horseback." The implications of what he was suggesting made Zara's cheeks warm. People would talk. A small smile curved his lips. People always talk. It's what they do when there's nothing else to occupy them during long winters. Zara couldn't help but smile in return. "That's certainly true." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind since they left his cabin. "Why are you doing this, Bryce, helping us so much?" He was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "When I saw you on that ice carrying your brother, refusing to give up despite the danger." He shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. "I've never seen such courage, such devotion." His eyes met hers again. "You remind me of what matters in this life, Zara Montgomery, and that's something I'd been forgetting." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep within her. For the first time since her parents' deaths, Zara felt a flutter of hope for the future. "Stay," she said softly. "At least for a few days. Help us get back on our feet." Relief washed over his features. "I'd be honored." Those few days stretched into a week, then two. Bryce threw himself into the work of restoring the Montgomery homestead with a dedication that impressed even Adam. He repaired the barn roof, reinforced the chicken coop, and helped butcher one of the cows that was too weak to survive the remainder of the winter. The meat would see them through until spring. Word spread about the Montgomerys' return, and neighbors began to appear. Mrs. Peterson from the next valley brought a basket of preserved vegetables, and the news that she had taken in the Montgomerys' horses when no one had been seen at the property for days. "Couldn't let good animals starve," she explained, eyeing Bryce with undisguised curiosity. "And who might you be, young man?" "Bryce Harlan, madam, from north of the river." The older woman's eyebrows rose. "Harlan, the doctor's son?" Bryce nodded, surprise evident on his face. "You knew my father. He delivered my youngest 30 years ago this spring," Mrs. Peterson replied. "Fine man, I was sorry to hear of his passing." Her shrewd gaze moved between Bryce and Zara. "Well, it's good to see someone looking after these children. Their parents would be grateful." After she left, Zara couldn't help but laugh at Bryce's discomfited expression. "Children." "I'm 22 years old." To Mrs. Peterson, anyone under 50 is a child, he replied with a wry smile. "Though I'm not sure how I feel about being cast as your guardian." "Guardian is certainly not how I think of you," Zara said, then blushed at the implications of her words. Bryce's gaze softened. "No." Before she could respond, Adam burst through the door, excitement written across his features. "The Clarksons are bringing our horses back tomorrow, and Mr. Clarkson says he has work for me if I want it, helping with his spring planting." Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. With Adam employed and their horses returned, their most immediate concerns would be addressed. "That's wonderful news." "Indeed it is," Bryce agreed, though something in his tone suggested mixed emotions. "You'll be well on your way to self-sufficiency before you know it." That evening, as Adam snored softly in his room, Zara found Bryce on the porch, staring up at the star-filled sky. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the night chill and joined him. "You're thinking of leaving," she said quietly. It wasn't a question, he nodded slowly. "Ben will be back any day now, and you and Adam seem to be finding your footing." "That doesn't mean we don't still need you," Zara ventured, her heart pounding at her own boldness. Bryce turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Is that true, Zara? Do you need me?" The question hung between them, fraught with meaning. Zara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I've been thinking about what you said about making new memories." And And I find that the memories I've made with you these past weeks are ones I'm not ready to let go of. She stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. I don't want you to leave, Bryce, not yet. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. I don't want to go, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion, but I need to know what you're asking of me, Zara. Because my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship, and I can't pretend otherwise. The admission sent a thrill through her. I'm asking you to stay, she whispered. To see where this leads. I've never felt this way about anyone before, and it terrifies me and exhilarates me all at once. Bryce's smile was tender as his hand cupped her cheek. That makes two of us. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, Zara felt as though all the broken pieces of her life were suddenly rearranging themselves into something new and beautiful. She leaned into the kiss, her hands finding his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. When they finally parted, breathless and slightly dazed, Bryce rested his forehead against hers. I'll stay, he promised, for as long as you'll have me. As winter gradually gave way to spring, Bryce divided his time between the two homesteads. Ben Harlan returned in late February, bringing with him supplies from Laramie and a boisterous energy that filled the Harlan cabin with laughter during the brothers' shared meals. Unlike his more reserved older brother, Ben took an immediate liking to Adam and Zara. About time Bryce found himself some proper company, he declared upon meeting them, been trying to convince him to socialize more for years. Ben, Bryce warned, but his brother merely grinned. What? It's the truth. You'd have become a hermit if left to your own devices. Ben turned to Zara with a conspiratorial wink, had to practically drag him to the harvest dance last year, which was a complete waste of time, Bryce countered. As I recall, you spent the entire evening making eyes at Sarah Jenkins, while I stood in the corner counting the minutes until we could leave. Sarah Jenkins has the prettiest eyes in the territory, Ben said defensively. And if you'd actually danced instead of brooding in the corner, you might have enjoyed yourself. The brotherly banter continued throughout the evening, revealing a side of Bryce that Zara had only glimpsed occasionally. With Ben, he was more relaxed, quicker to smile, more willing to engage in good-natured teasing. She found herself warming to the younger Harlan, grateful for the way he had drawn Adam out of his shell with stories of his travels and promises to teach him more advanced riding skills when the weather improved. As March arrived with its unpredictable weather patterns, the rhythms of ranch life dictated their days. The brothers prepared for calving season, while Zara and Adam readied their fields for spring planting. The four often worked together, moving between the properties as needs dictated. It was during one such shared workday, as they repaired fences along the boundary between the two properties, that Ben pulled Zara aside while Bryce and Adam worked farther down the line. My brother's in love with you, he said without preamble, his direct gaze so similar to Bryce's that it momentarily startled her. Zara's cheeks warmed. He's been very kind to us. It's more than kindness, and you know it. Ben's expression softened. I haven't seen him like this since before our parents died. He smiles now, actually laughs sometimes. He glanced down the fence line to where Bryce was demonstrating a knot to Adam. I thought I'd lost that part of him forever. He's a good man, Zara said softly, the best I've ever known. He is, Ben agreed, too good for his own welfare sometimes. He fixed her with a penetrating look. Do you love him back? The blunt question took her by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Ben clearly didn't share his brother's reserve. I do, she admitted, the first time she had spoken the words aloud. Very much. A broad smile spread across Ben's face. Well then, that's all that matters, isn't it? He clapped her on the shoulder. Welcome to the family, Zara Montgomery. We haven't discussed marriage, she protested, though the thought sent a flutter of excitement through her. Ben laughed. Give it time. Bryce moves at his own pace, but he gets there eventually. He nodded toward the two men approaching them. Just don't wait too long. Life out here is uncertain enough without denying yourself happiness when you find it. As spring advanced, the relationship between Zara and Bryce deepened. They stole moments together whenever possible, a shared sunset on the porch, a quiet walk along the river that had first brought them together, tender kisses exchanged when Adam and Ben were occupied elsewhere. Bryce spoke of his dreams for expanding the ranch, perhaps combining efforts with the Montgomery property if Zara and Adam were amenable. Adam, thriving under the mentorship of both Harlan brothers, spoke enthusiastically of the possibility. "We could run twice as many cattle with our lands combined," he pointed out one evening as the four of them shared supper at the Montgomery cabin. "And the southern pasture would be perfect for those Morgans you've been wanting to breed, Ben." "It makes practical sense," Ben agreed, his eyes twinkling as he glanced between his brother and Zara. "Of course, there'd need to be some sort of formal arrangement." Bryce shot his brother a warning look. "That's a conversation for another time." But later that night, as Bryce prepared to ride back to his own cabin, he lingered on the porch with Zara. "Ben lacks subtlety," he said apologetically, "but he's not entirely wrong about the practical advantages of combining our operations." Zara smiled up at him. "Is that your roundabout way of proposing a business partnership, Bryce Harlan?" He took her hands in his expression suddenly serious. "No, when I propose something to you, Zara Montgomery, it won't be about business." Her heart skipped a beat at the implied promise in his words. "I'll look forward to that conversation then." He kissed her gently, then more deeply, his arms pulling her close as if he couldn't bear to let her go. When they finally parted, his voice was husky with emotion. "I never expected to find you, Zara. Never thought I'd feel this way again after losing so much." "Nor I," she whispered against his lips. "You gave me back hope when I thought it was gone forever." The moment for his formal proposal came on a warm April evening as they stood on the banks of the now flowing river that had brought them together. The ice had long since melted, replaced by the rushing waters of spring runoff. Wildflowers dotted the riverbank, and the setting sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Bryce had asked her to ride with him to check on a new foal, but instead had guided their horses to this spot. Now, as they stood hand in hand beside the water, Zara could feel his nervousness in the slight tremor of his fingers. "This river nearly took you from me before I even knew you," he said softly, his gaze moving from the flowing water to her face. "Now I can't imagine my life without you in it." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "This was my mother's," he explained, tipping a delicate gold ring with a small pearl into his palm. "She made me promise to give it to the woman who captured my heart as she had captured my father's." Zara's breath caught as he knelt before her, the ring held between his fingers. "Zara Montgomery, you crossed a frozen river carrying your brother, and in saving you both, I found my own salvation. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded, too overcome to speak. When she finally found her voice, it emerged as a whisper. "Yes, Bryce, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms, his kiss conveying all the joy and promise of their shared future. Their wedding took place in June, a simple ceremony attended by neighbors from both sides of the river. The Reverend Wilson rode in from Laramie to officiate, and Mrs. Peterson organized a feast that would be talked about for seasons to come. Ben stood proudly as his brother's best man while Adam gave his sister away, his young face solemn with the responsibility. Under an arch of wildflowers, with the distant mountains as their witness, Bryce and Zara exchanged vows to love and cherish each other for all their days. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests echoed across the valley. "Mrs. Harlan," Bryce whispered against her ear as they moved through the crowd of well-wishers. "I like the sound of that." "As do I, husband," Zara replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst from happiness. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing in the yard between the two cabins. Ben had cleared the space and constructed a wooden dance floor for the occasion, insisting that his brother's wedding would be a proper affair despite its frontier setting. As twilight descended, lanterns were lit around the perimeter, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Bryce led Zara in their first dance as husband and wife, his usual reserve melting away as he swung her confidently around the floor. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she laughed as he executed a perfect turn. "I thought you hated dancing." "I said I hated standing in the corner at dances," he corrected with a smile. "Not dancing itself. My mother insisted both her sons learn properly." His arms tightened around her waist, though I've never enjoyed it quite so much as I do now. Later, as the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Bryce found Adam sitting alone on the porch steps, watching the remaining couples sway to the fiddle music. "Everything all right?" Bryce asked, settling beside his new brother-in-law. Adam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Just thinking about how much has changed since winter, if Zara hadn't been so stubborn about crossing that river." "She saved your life with that stubbornness," Bryce reminded him, "and found you in the process." Adam smiled. "I've never seen her so happy, not even before our parents died." Bryce felt a surge of emotion at the young man's words. "I'll do everything in my power to keep her that way, Adam. You have my word on that." "I know you will." Adam extended his hand. "Thank you for loving my sister and for being the brother I never had." Bryce clasped the offered hand, touched by the sentiment. "The feeling is mutual." When the last guest had departed and Ben had tactfully announced his intention to spend the night in the barn, Bryce carried his bride across the threshold of what was now their shared home. The Harlan cabin had been expanded over the spring months, with a new bedroom added for the newlyweds and the original space renovated to accommodate Ben's continued presence. "Welcome home, Mrs. Harlan," Bryce said softly as he set Zara on her feet in the bedroom that was illuminated only by moonlight streaming through the window. Zara reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "Home is wherever you are, Bryce." As he lowered his lips to hers, Bryce marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment, a desperate crossing of a frozen river, a brother's life hanging in the balance, and the unexpected gift of love that had blossomed in the harshest of seasons. In the years that followed, the combined Harlan-Montgomery ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Ben eventually married Sarah Jenkins, building his own cabin on the eastern edge of the property. Adam grew into a capable young man, eventually taking over the daily management of the cattle operation while Bryce focused on breeding the Morgan horses that became known throughout the territory for their strength and endurance. Their first child, a daughter they named Grace after Bryce's mother, arrived the following spring, followed 2 years later by a son they called James in honor of Zara's father. The children grew strong and healthy in the clean mountain air, surrounded by the love of their extended family and the beauty of the Wyoming wilderness. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled across the valley and snow piled against the cabin walls, Bryce and Zara would sit before the fire with their children, recounting the story of how they met, of a desperate crossing on treacherous ice, of a brother's life hanging in the balance, and of the cowboy on the other side who opened not just his home, but his heart. "It was the bravest thing I'd ever seen," Bryce would tell the wide-eyed children. "Your mother, carrying your Uncle Adam across that frozen river, refusing to give up despite the danger. And the most foolish," Zara would add with a smile, "but sometimes the heart knows what the head does not." Grace, with her father's blue eyes and thoughtful nature, would invariably sigh at the romance of it all, while James, practical like his mother, would question the logistics of carrying someone across breaking ice. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Bryce surprised Zara with a special gift, a small gold locket containing miniature portraits of their children on one side and a tiny fragment of river stone on the other. "From the spot where I first saw you," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. "Where our story began." Zara touched the locket reverently, then reached up to kiss her husband. "Our story began long before that, I think," she said softly. "It just took a frozen river to bring us together." As the years passed and their family grew, adding 2 more children to their brood, Bryce and Zara remained each other's steadfast companions through all of life's challenges, drought years, and abundant harvests, illness and health, joy and sorrow. The love that had sparked between them on a frigid January day only deepened with time, like a river carving its essential path through the landscape of their shared life. And each winter, when the North Platte froze solid and snow blanketed the valley, they would stand together at the window, watching the ice glitter in the moonlight, remembering the desperate crossing that had changed their lives forever, a young woman's courage, a brother's life hanging in the balance, and the cowboy who had opened his home and his heart, finding in their love a warmth that even the harshest Wyoming winter could never diminish.